Title: How I Went from Broke to a $130,000 tech salary. Can you imagine going from so broke you have to choose between rent and groceries to landing a job that pays $130,000 a year? That's my story. And I did it without a fancy degree or a single connection in the tech world. For years, I felt like I was stuck on a hamster wheel, running as fast as I could and getting nowhere. I was trapped in a cycle of debt and just dread, watching my dreams disappear with every bill that showed up. But in just a few years, I completely flipped the script. Stick with me, and I'll give you the exact roadmap that took me from financial disaster to a six-figure tech salary. Now, this isn't a story about winning the lottery. It's not some get-rich-quick fantasy. This is about a real strategic plan that anyone with a bit of grit can follow. In this video, I'm laying it all out, no gatekeeping. We'll talk about my life before tech, the exact moment I knew something had to change, and most importantly, the step-by-step playbook I used to make it happen. I'm going to break down the skills I learned, how I built a killer portfolio with zero experience, my unique job application strategy that actually got me noticed, and how I aced the interviews. By the end of this, you won't just have my story, you'll have a practical guide to start writing your own. Just a few years ago, my life was a completely different story. I was working in customer service for a retail company. Let's be honest, it was a dead-end job. The pay was just enough to scrape by, and I mean scrape. I remember the constant, heavy knot of anxiety in my stomach. My bank account was a permanent member of the double digits club. I was living paycheck to paycheck, except the paycheck often ran out of steam long before the next one hit. That meant making those soul-crushing choices, like paying the electric bill or having a full grocery cart for the week. My job wasn't terrible because of the people, but it was a trap. The salary was stagnant, with these tiny, almost insulting annual raises that didn't even touch inflation. Career growth was a complete myth, a carrot dangled in front of us that we were never meant to reach. The best I could hope for was a shift supervisor role, which meant more responsibility, longer hours, and a pay bump so small it was laughable. I felt invisible. My days were a monotonous loop of solving the same problems, answering the same questions, and calming down frustrated customers. There was no creativity, no challenge, and definitely no feeling of accomplishment. I'd get home at the end of the day feeling totally drained, not from working hard, but from the sheer soul-sucking boredom of it all. I had no energy left for hobbies, friends, or even just thinking about a better future. I was just surviving. The financial pressure was the worst part, though. I had student loans from a degree I wasn't using, some credit card debt from patching the gaps between paychecks, and this constant fear of an unexpected bill. A flat tire wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a full-blown financial crisis. Going to the dentist felt like a luxury I couldn't afford. I'd watch friends in other fields start to buy houses, travel, and build savings, while I was doing mental math to see if I could afford a coffee on my way to work. It was humiliating. I felt like I'd done everything I was supposed to. I went to college, got a job, worked hard, but the life I was promised never showed up. I was just stuck, and I could see the next 40 years stretching out in front of me, looking exactly the same. The turning point wasn't some big dramatic movie scene. It was a slow burn that finally exploded on a random bleak Tuesday morning. I was sitting in my car in the office parking lot, gripping the steering wheel, just staring at the building. I couldn't make myself go in. The idea of another 8 hours of the same routine for the same pathetic pay felt physically impossible. That was my rock bottom. I realized if I didn't do something drastic, this was it. This was my life. That day I went home, and for the first time in years, I did more than just wish things were different. I started researching. I literally typed into Google, careers with high demand and good pay that don't require a specific degree. And one word kept screaming back at me: tech. When I started digging, what I found blew my mind. The tech industry wasn't just for geniuses who were coding in the crib. It was an industry that was absolutely booming and desperate for skilled people. The U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics was projecting massive growth for computer and IT jobs. way faster than pretty much anything else. And it wasn't just in Silicon Valley. Tech jobs were everywhere, in every industry you can think of. 3 things really hooked me. First, the money. The average salary for a tech professional in the US was already well over $100,000. I saw numbers like $112,521 and even higher for specialized roles. That wasn't just a salary. That was freedom. That was the difference between nonstop anxiety and actually living. Second, the way in was different. Tech seemed to care more about what you could do than what degree you had. People were breaking in with online courses, coding boot camps, and specific certifications. This was a game changer. I couldn't afford to go back to school for 4 years, but I could definitely invest a few months and the fraction of the cost into a focused program. Third, the lifestyle was a massive draw. Tech jobs offered flexibility, with tons of remote or hybrid roles. The culture was about getting things done, not just punching a clock. That meant a better work-life balance and doing work that was actually interesting. It was the complete opposite of the rigid, boring world I was trapped in. That Tuesday, I made a decision. I was done being a victim of my circumstances. I was going to get into tech. Making the decision was the easy part. Figuring out how to actually do it was harder. With no tech background and a budget of basically zero, I had to get crafty. I built a 4-step plan that became my guide for the next year. Step 1. The skills I learned and how I did it for cheap. First, I had to figure out what to learn. Tech is huge. After a ton of research, I landed on web development. It seemed concrete. You write code, a website shows up. Plus, there was a clear path to an entry-level job and tons of demand. Since a fancy university program or a full-time boot camp was out of the question, I pieced together my education with affordable and free resources. I started with free platforms to learn the absolute basics: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. I treated it like a second job. Every single night after my soul-crushing day job and all weekend, I was glued to my computer, learning. Once I had the fundamentals down, I knew I needed something more structured to get to a professional level. I invested a couple $100 in a top-rated web development course on a popular online learning site. It was a tiny fraction of a boot camp's cost and became my lifeline. It guided me from the basics into more advanced stuff like the JavaScript framework React, building a backend with Node.js, and working with databases. The key wasn't just watching videos. For every new concept, I'd pause, code it myself, break it, fix it, and mess around with it. You can't learn to code by just watching someone else. It was tough, and there were so many nights I wanted to quit, but seeing a real app come to life from my own keyboard was the most incredible feeling. I was building something. I was making progress. Step 2. Building my portfolio from scratch. No experience, no problem. Knowing how to code is one thing. Proving it is everything. Without a degree or job experience, my portfolio had to do all the talking. It had to be my entire sales pitch. I made sure not to just copy tutorial projects. I needed to show I could solve real problems. I focused on 3 main projects. First, a fancy to-do list app. Sounds basic, I know, but I went all out. It had user logins, a database to save everything, and a clean design. It showed I understood the full stack, from what the user sees to what happens behind the scenes. Second, I built a clone of a popular social media site. This was way more complex and proved I could handle features like user profiles, posts, and comments. It showed I could build a bigger, more complicated application. My final and most important project was a personal passion project. I built a web app for a local animal shelter to help them manage their adoptable pets. This was the crown jewel. It showed I had the initiative to find a real-world problem and solve it with code. I actually met with the shelter staff, figured out what they needed, and built it for them. This gave me an amazing story to tell in interviews. It wasn't just a project. It was a real solution for a real client. I put all my code on GitHub with clear documentation because that's the first place recruiters look. This portfolio was my proof. Step 3. My job application strategy. How I cut through the noise. With a solid portfolio, it was time to find a job. I knew that blasting my resume into the void on job sites was a losing game. The tech unemployment rate is super low, which means companies are hiring, but you still have to get their attention. First, I totally revamped my resume. I rephrased my customer service experience to highlight skills tech companies care about: problem solving, communication, and managing client expectations. Then, I made my project section the star of the show, detailing the tech I used and the problem each project solved. Next, I went beyond the big job boards. I made a target list of 50 companies I actually wanted to work for. I'd find the hiring manager or a senior developer on LinkedIn and send them a personalized message. I wouldn't just say, "Hey, I need a job." I'd say, "I'm a new developer and a huge fan of the work we're doing. I actually built a project that's similar to your product, and I'd love to show you how it works." The response rate was night and day. Networking was also huge. I went to local tech meetups, both online and in person. I didn't go to beg for a job. I went to learn and meet people. I'd talk to developers about what they were working on and share my projects. That's how I got my first real interview. Someone I met was impressed with my portfolio and walked my resume directly to their manager. A warm introduction is worth 1,000 cold applications. Step 4. Mailing the interview. What they really ask. Getting the interview is only half the fight. Tech interviews are famously tough, with multiple rounds of technical and behavioral questions. I prepared like my life depended on it. For the technical parts, I lived on coding challenge websites. I spent an hour every single day solving problems to train my brain to think like an engineer under pressure. I also brushed up on computer science fundamentals, things like data structures and algorithms, using books and online guides. For the behavioral questions, I used the STAR method: situation, task, action, result, to prepare stories about my projects. When they asked, "Tell me about a time you faced a challenge," I had a great story about a nasty bug in my animal shelter app and the exact steps I took to crush it. In the interviews, I owned my non-traditional background and framed it as a strength. I explained how my customer service job taught me empathy and communication, skills that are gold in a team setting. I showed them my passion, my drive, and the cold, hard proof of my skills sitting in my portfolio. I wasn't just another applicant. I was a problem solver who had already proven I could deliver. After 2 months of intense searching and interviewing, it happened. I got the call. An offer for a junior software developer role. The salary was $85,000. I hung up the phone and just sat there in silence, letting it sink in. It was more than double my old salary. I cried. It was a mix of relief, joy, and just being damn proud of what I'd accomplished. That first day on the job felt like a dream. I was surrounded by brilliant, passionate people building cool stuff. I learned more in my first 6 months than in the last 5 years of my life. Over the next few years, I kept learning. The tech industry pays you to stay curious. I took on bigger projects, started mentoring new developers, and began specializing in high-demand fields like cloud computing. With that experience and specialization came promotions and salary bumps. Today, I'm at $130,000. But the after is about so much more than the money. Even though the financial security has changed everything, the constant stress about bills, gone. I paid off all my debt. I have savings. I can actually think about the future, about investing, about buying a home. But it's the freedom that's the real prize. I have a great work-life balance. My work is genuinely fulfilling, and I have control over my career in a way I never imagined. I went from feeling stuck and invisible to feeling empowered and full of potential. I know what you might be thinking, because I thought it too. That's cool, but I don't have a degree. Neither do I. My portfolio and my interview performance were my degree. More and more tech companies are realizing that what you can do is way more important than a piece of paper. Maybe you're thinking, I'm too old for this. Honestly, your age doesn't matter as much as your ability to learn. I made this switch in my late 20s, and I've worked alongside people who did it in their 30s, 40s, and even 50s. It's never too late to change your life. Or you think, I'm not a math genius. You don't have to be. For what I do in web development, the most important skills are logic, creative problem solving, and just plain old persistence. If you enjoy the process of building things and can stick with a problem until you figure it out, you have what it takes. This journey isn't easy, but it is 100% possible. If my story hit home for you, and you want more practical, no-fluff advice on how to break into tech, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell. I'm going to be dropping more videos that go even deeper on each of these steps, from portfolio projects to interview secrets. And drop a comment below letting me know what your single biggest roadblock is right now. I read every single one, and I'll do my best to help you out. My journey wasn't magic. It was the result of a clear plan, a ton of hard work, and the belief that I deserved a better life. I went from broke and hopeless to a six-figure salary in a career I actually love. The road was full of frustration and self-doubt, but every hour I spent learning, every line of code I wrote, every rejection, it was all a stepping stone. The most important thing to take from this is that a massive change is possible for you too. You don't need a fancy degree, you don't need to be a genius, and you don't need to get lucky. You need a plan, the grit to see it through, and the guts to take that first step. If I can do it, starting with absolutely nothing, I promise you, so can you. Your new future is out there waiting. Go build it.